The thing I love about fantasy is the sprawling world, the deep lore, the world building, the unique class structures, just the detail you get from a fantasy book. Now the upside and technically the downside, given what this video is about, is that that's a lot of pages, and that's tough. As a slow reader, I'm not reading the amount I would like to be reading because there's so many great books at the moment. And part of the problem is that they're just so big. I have a love-hate relationship with long books. I love them. I just wish I had more time to consume them. So I thought I'd make a video on the longest books in my TBR. And you can let me know which ones you've read and which ones I should prioritize. First of all, The Wheel of Time. I am currently on book 3 of The Wheel of Time, and I really enjoyed book 1 and 2. But it's just every time I look at it, I think, wow, that's going to be at least a couple of weeks. And even then, I'm only one step further on a very long journey. That being said, I do actually really like reading these over a longer period of time and really letting them sit and settle in my head. I think I would be burnt out if I was reading these back to back. But of course, it's a classic and I absolutely love The Wheel of Time. I love the writing style and the atmosphere you really get from this era of fantasy. It's very much the way it's written in the prose. You just get sucked in and immersed into this world. It also has some amazing world building, great character work. I love Egwene, Nynaeve, Perrin, Mat. I do like Rand. I was a wee bit frustrated with him in Great Hunt, but I do like him still. Lan, Moraine. I mean, come on. It's got a great cast of characters. They're just so threateningly big. Don't take that out of context. But I'm really excited to continue my journey into The Wheel of Time. Sticking on the sequel bandwagon, we have Jade Legacy. I just finished Jade War fairly recently, and it was great. It wasn't an all-time favourite, but I really enjoyed it. I did want a short break before I jumped into the final book, but I've heard the final book is even more emotionally damaging. The middle book really felt like a middle book to me. It felt like a step in the journey where we didn't get many things concluded. So I'm excited to see how some of these bigger arcs are concluded in this final book. I did jump between the audiobook and the physical while I was reading Jade War, so I will probably do the same with Jade Legacy, which does help working through these chunkier tomes. But I've heard it's a really great and satisfying ending to the series, and I've heard that every book gets better and better, so the fact that I've enjoyed the first 2 books has been really excited to see where it all comes to an end. If you've read the Greenbone Saga, leave a comment of how emotionally traumatized you were by that last book. I need to know what I'm getting myself into, that final novel. Next up we have a not sequel, a brand new book, which is Sons of Darkness. This is an Indian grimdark epic fantasy series retelling in the vein of Game of Thrones. The author just recently is getting republished with Head of Zeus / Bloomsbury, but there was a time that this came off the market, but it's coming back on the market and I'm super excited that people can get their hands back on it because I've heard only amazing things about this. And the only reason I've not read it yet is I really want the space and the time to sit and really be immersed in this world, because I genuinely think it will be an all-time favourite when I'm finished. Just sounds fantastic. And also Broken Binding are doing a special edition, so if you've not got it yet and you're thinking about picking up a copy, maybe worth checking out over at Broken Binding. But yeah, this is 670 pages and quite small font. Page count isn't always a perfect indication of how long a book's going to be, because it all is dependent on margin size, font size, even what type of font the author is using. So that's why word count is a much better way, and that's why you hear authors and writers talk about their books in word counts rather than page counts, because page count's it varies so widely. So that's why I'm saying that this is quite a small font, because it's got some hefty chonkage to it. But yeah, very excited for Sons of Darkness. Continuing with more chonkage, we have Aduel's Sin. This is the sequel to Illborn, which is also a chunky brick. I mean, look at these. I love it. I just wish I had more time. This is a self-published series, multi-POV. I would say it's very mystery based because it is to do with these 4 POVs completely separate in the world, and they all have this same dream of walking up a mountain path. And they start displaying these abilities, and it has this wider mystery of what is connecting them all together and what are these powers, as well as a very conflicted world with an angry religious sect of people who are doing some pretty dodgy things. It's a bit like trying to explain the synopsis to The Way of Kings. There's just a lot of moving parts, especially when you have 4 different POVs. But I absolutely loved Ill-Born. It was one of my favorite reads of last year. So I'm so excited for Aduel's Sin. I cannot recommend Ill-Born highly enough. And let me know if you read Aduel's Sin, because I've heard it's really good. Sticking on the self-pub bandwagon, we have not All Blood and Fire, but the 3rd book of War and Ruin, which I have on Kindle, which is why I don't have a physical copy of it yet. But if you can imagine, it's probably about 3 times the size of this. So much so that Ryan even said in an interview that he tried to put the 3rd book in the same formatting style as this book, and the printer would not let him print off hard copies and paperbacks because it was too long. It exceeded their maximum page count. So that shows how long book 3 is. This is a classical fantasy series with dragons, where the world is kept in check by the Dragon Guard, which are these warriors who ride dragons, funnily enough. But when the main character is bonded with an egg and gets his own dragon, it feels like there is a chance to stand against the Dragon Guard and the oppressive rulers. I am super excited for the 3rd book. This series gets better and better with each installment. I loved the first one, it was great. The second one was even better. The Fall, the novella, which you can read either before or after the first book. I read it after, and I think that that's the better way of reading it, but there's some divisive interpretations in the fandom. And also The Exile, which is a novella between the 2nd and 3rd book. And to say that that novella is my favourite in the series, The Exile, every single installment, in my opinion, has got better and better. So the fact that this is a 1,000 page, everything coming together, has me so excited to pick it up. I do think I'll need to hunt down like the story so far, because it's been a wee while since I've read the 2nd book. But I love these characters, I love this world, and I cannot wait to dive into that big 1,000 page plus chunker that is Of War and Ruin. It's going to Of War and Ruin my TBR. Oh, and book 2 did end on a bit of a cliffhanger. I need to see how that turns out, so I need to get to book 3 soon. Next up, we have the first binding by R.R. Verde. This was my most anticipated read of last year, and it is almost April of this year and I haven't read it yet. I haven't picked it up because of very similar reasons. I haven't picked up Sons of Darkness. This feels like an adventure unto itself, and I would really like to have the space and the time to really read this slowly and enjoy it. I did read the first couple chapters, I think it was, and I adore the prose style. It's very reminiscent of The Name of the Wind. It has brought some controversy because of how similar it is to The Name of the Wind. However, it's been a wee while since I've read The Name of the Wind, and I absolutely love The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear, so I'm all up for trying something very similar. I love that style, and who knows when we'll get book 3, so I do believe that we're getting the 2nd book, the 2nd binding. I'm just kidding, it's not called the 2nd binding. Funny if it was, but I don't think it is. This year, so I do want to read this over the summer before then, so I can be ready for book 2. But yeah, 800+ pages, small font. It's got all the beautiful time sync red flags that I'm looking forward to. I'd be really interested to hear if you've read the first binding, what you thought of it. It sounds absolutely incredible and gets some really good ratings, but equally also gets a lot of people who really don't like it. But I think it's just because it's so similar to The Name of the Wind, it gets some lower ratings as well. Because if that's the case, that doesn't overly bother me, because it has been so long since I've read The Name of the Wind and I loved it. So I'm wondering if you have space between The Name of the Wind and this, if it would be a better read. If you read them back to back, I could see how it would be a little more frustrating. But if you've read it, please let me know what you thought. Next up, we have The Shadow of What Was Lost. Chunky, 700 page plus time travel epic fantasy, start of a trilogy. I'm here for it. I've mentioned this in a couple videos because I've been wanting to read it for a while now. Pretty much since the Broken Binding sent out this book in their sub. It just sounds right up my street, and the idea of having time travel and fantasy is something that I'm really interested in seeing more of. It's something you don't see particularly often, but if you do, it's usually in a shorter, more mystery sense. You get a lot of short mystery sci-fi thrillers that have time travel and things like that in it, but blending it into a well-realized fantasy world. I mean, the first book is over 700 pages, and the first quote on the back says, "Wonderful world building and terrific characters." And another one, "Love Wheel of Time. This is about to become your new favorite series." So a well-realized, fully fleshed out fantasy world with time travel in it. That just sounds like so much fun. So yes, I'm super excited to get to this. Next up, we have A Way of Kings Prime. The Stormlight Archive is my favorite series of all time. I absolutely adore these books, and it's what got me really back into adult fantasy. And for those who don't know, there was another version of The Way of Kings back in 2002. Sanderson wrote out this full big chunker of The Way of Kings. It's about 770 pages, but he wasn't sure it was right, so he let it sit, and then he ended up rewriting it into The Way of Kings we know today. But I believe this edition is very different. The focus in The Way of Kings proper released edition is Kaladin, but I think Dalinar is the main focus of The Way of Kings Prime, and some characters just didn't exist at all. Like, I'm pretty sure Adolin just isn't in The Way of Kings Prime. So I'm really intrigued to see what his first version of The Way of Kings is. I think it's awesome that we get someone as open and has good communication with his fans as Brandon Sanderson, that he feels like he can share this early version of The Way of Kings. So this is completely not canon. It's like The Way of Kings in another dimension, and I'm intrigued to see what his first interpretation of this story was, and what bits he took out and what bits he left in for the final version that ended up becoming The Way of Kings. I just think it'll be a lot of fun to read. I might actually make a reading vlog of it. Also, I believe that you can get an ebook of The Way of Kings Prime for free on his website. Originally, it was a stretch goal for his Kickstarter, not the secret project one that blew up last year. The Way of Kings Leatherbound Anniversary Edition, and you could pay a little extra and get a physical copy. I think there is a free ebook version on Dragonsteel's website. So if you want to check out where The Way of Kings and the Stormlight Archive started back in 2002, you can grab that on your Kindle right now. That'll do it for today. Those are some of the longest books on my TBR. There's something so special about a chunky fantasy book where you can just get completely immersed in and find all these little details and have the time to really develop the world and the characters. There's really just nothing better. So please let me know some of the longest books on your TBR, and also which ones of these should I prioritize and read soon.